everybody, and welcome to the Institute of Masters of Wine YouTube channel. I'm Cathy van Zyl, and we're going to be featuring a number of interviews on this channel in the coming months with people who've been making news or making waves around the world. This evening, I'm lucky to have Carmen Stevens, a winemaker from South Africa, with me. Just to introduce everybody to what Carmen is having to go through at the moment, I'm very lucky. I have lights shining down on my gorgeous face. Carmen, unfortunately, is sitting in the dark because she's experiencing what we have in South Africa known as load shedding. Carmen, would you like to introduce the people to load shedding and just tell them a little bit about how this impacts your everyday as a winemaker in South Africa?
Thank you, Cathy. So we have scheduled load shedding in South Africa, and it means the power is cut for 2 to 2.5 hours. Now, there's different levels of load sheddings, level 1, level 2. We even started about 3 weeks ago, Cathy, with level 6.
Correct.
Which means that in one day, we can have up to 5 to 6 hours of no power, and you are basically stuck unless you have a generator. Now, a generator is a nice idea. The other problem that comes with a generator, it is diesel driven, and diesel at the moment goes for what per litre? I can't even remember. It is ridiculously expensive.
Close to 20 Rand a litre. I know that it costs me nearly 2,000 Rand to fill my Colt bucky, and that takes, it's got, I think, an 80 litre tank. So it's a great amount of money.
It's a great amount of money. I actually filled my car last week, and I remember in October of last year, it cost me 820. When I filled my car, it was 1,560 Rand. That is the
it escalated very quickly, the petrol prices and the prices of diesel. So as a winemaker, this is an unforeseen cost for you, the cost of diesel to keep your equipment going. I suppose we're now in the middle of winter, so that's not such a big issue, but in the middle of harvest, that can play havoc. How do you run your piping? How do you run your pumps? How do you run your presses?
So I think, Cathy, for that, I'll definitely have to invest in a generator. Luckily, because it's only 2 hours, the impact on the wines that's fermenting is not that great, because as soon as the power goes on, we start, especially on the reds, to start with the pump overs or rack and returns to bring down that if there is a spike in temperature. I think the biggest issue here is, you sit with people that you have to pay that is sitting almost for 4 hours in a day. And there is no compensation, doing nothing. They can do nothing. The cellar is so dark, no equipment can run. You can try your utmost to open doors and windows, but it's just not enough to make a difference. So you can't even say I'm going to pack wine because it's going to happen in the dark. There might be a glitch. So we prefer that people rather just sit for 4 hours, and we still have to pay them at the end of the day. So that's a huge impact. I actually felt like writing to the government and just requesting my money back. I don't think I'm
It's a pity we can't just deduct it from our tax payment. Oh, and there you are, flashing the light. Fantastic. So just to go back to that, it's actually lovely. I thought you were wearing a dark colored t-shirt, but I see it's not. It's a light hoodie. Okay. So just to go back to that as well, though, it does impact if you don't have a bottling machine in your facility and you've hired a bottling machine for a day, for 8 hours or 10 hours at your site, and then poof, bang goes the power. Do they bring their own generators? Do they run petrol?
No. The bottling, I'm actually bottling end of July, and that is going to be a problem. We are actually worked out a schedule as to what we'll do and how we'll do it. That's the first thing. The other thing is you have to have surge protectors through your whole cellar, otherwise your equipment will blow. So, it's not just, here comes the power. You actually, what we do is 5 minutes before because it's a schedule, I can say, okay, 5 minutes before the time, cut everything, unplug everything. Although I have surge protectors, I still need to somehow mitigate. If the current that comes back is too high, it can blow my equipment.
Yeah. And like me, you must have a very small inverter to keep your internet running. Because that's a major impact for my business. If I'm doing tasting notes or speaking to people, if the internet goes, it does take 2.5 hours out of my day in the morning and 2.5 hours out of my day in the afternoon. It is quite debilitating. But enough about that. We make plans. As you see, the world keeps on turning, even though we don't have power. And so let's carry on with this interview. And I'd really like now to introduce you properly. Now that everybody can actually see you, I'll introduce you properly to whoever's listening to this podcast. So Carmen Stevens has been in the South African wine industry since 1995, when she graduated as the first Black South African to study winemaking in the country. Her wine business, Carmen Stevens Wines, was established in 2011, and its maiden vintage was at 2014. In January 2019, Carmen registered Carmen Stevens Wines as the first 100% Black-owned winery in South Africa, which is another milestone that she's made during her career. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. We'll unpack that and why it's so important. At the moment, Carmen gives back to her industry by serving on the Wine and Spirits Board and is also a representative on the South African Transformation Unit Board. Other concepts we'll discuss later. Now, over the years, Carmen has received many awards for wines and for acknowledging her drive. For example, she was named in 2019 as the Small Business Entrepreneur of the Year. But most recently, this year, in fact, earlier, just as we began our harvest, she was the recipient of the South African wine industry's 1659 Award for Visionary Leadership. The criteria for individuals and organizations to qualify for this prestigious award in South Africa include demonstrable efforts and initiatives that have benefited the South African wine industry, a lasting impact and a legacy, and to encourage and inspire others in the industry. And from what I've said about Carmen, there's no doubt that she wholeheartedly deserves this honor. And I know she's going to go on and do more and more because she's younger than I am. And she doesn't just focus her efforts on the South African wine industry. She's also launched the Carmen Stevens Foundation, which provides breakfasts and lunches to school children whose parents can't afford to feed them before they leave for school. So Carmen, it's a wonderful privilege to interview you. And what I'd like to start with, because I think it is an important question, is where did your passion come from and this desire to become a winemaker spring from?
Thank you, Cathy. You know, I always, initially I was very apprehensive to tell people this, but a few years ago it came out and it had a name. So initially when I was at school, and this is primary school, my mother used to sit with me every night because I really had a problem reading and writing English. And she was an avid Molson Booze reader.
Yeah.
And made me every night when she could come home, she would make me read from these books. Now, I always thought it was the romance around, but when I'm looking back now, I realize where I grew up. You know, there was obviously my background does not entail wine. We'd never had wine in our house, but this notion of people drinking wine, but also I think the settings and how green and lush and the opulence that was described in these books really made me want to, I think half the stuff I didn't understand, but it made me want to read. So every night she comes home and she makes me read, and I have to tell her what I understood. And I remember specifically about a girl in California that they were explaining that she was busy blending wine And I was very young, and I said to my mother, one day I'm gonna be a winemaker. And I think it was like whatever. And when I was eventually at my last year of schooling, I really looked into where can I study. And I think that's the first time that my mother realized this really had an impact on me. And initially she did say, please just don't become an alcoholic. Based on our history, based on our community, and you know, wine in our communities was really seen as an evil. So yeah, studying
You're a
wine.
romantic at heart, but you're a romantic maverick because you went against what the community wanted, but you were determined and struck it out on your own. That's
Yes.
fantastic. And tell us more about Carmen Stevens wines. How did that come about, and where do you get your fruit from? Because you don't own your own vineyards,
No.
but I think one of the biggest accomplishments I think that you've mentioned is that you actually have built and own your own winery now, and that's a big tick. So just tell us how it started and who helped you along the way, and then just tell us a little bit more about your range so we can understand how this passion of yours has interpreted itself into what you do today.
Yes. So Kathy, in 2010, I was working for a very small boutique winery, and I I got a phone call on a Friday night, and this gentleman with really beautiful English accent said, Carmen, how would you like to have your own wine brand? And I was like, please get a life. Who does this Friday night? And I still said, don't you have something better to do? Oh my God, it's Friday night. Because I really believed it was a prank. Asked him where he got my details from, and he said from a gentleman that's a very close friend of mine, Alex Dale. And I thought, Alex is known for pranks. So I just made it off as a prank. So I basically said, listen, go play somewhere else. I don't have time for this. And he sent me an email anyway, and it was Rowan Grumley. and
Aha.
and he said, please, would like to talk to you. Phoned me again on the Monday and said, have you seen my email? I was like, oh God, this is, how do I, how do I apologize for my really bad behavior? And he just said, listen, we would like to to work with you. The message is, if you make the wine, we'll buy the wine. And initially, I really thought this is too good to be true. And he asked if he can send me an email every month until I make up my mind. It took him 8 months to convince me. And
That's a
funny enough,
fantastic story. And this Rowan, he's from Naked Wine, just for the people who don't know.
yeah.
That's right. Okay. And so how's
And
it going from there?
it just, you know, it was amazing because he then he said to me, can't I fly you over for an interview? And I was a little bit suspicious about that as well. And then it just so happened that I had to go to the Netherlands, and I made contacts. Listen, is this proposal still on the table? He said, yes, I'm in the Netherlands. I can come over. And he said, no, you're too scared. I'll come to you. He flew over, came and interviewed me, wanted to understand what it is that drives me and where I see my future, and said, listen, we're really interested to help you to achieve this. And from there, we started very small, 25 tons. Today, in total, I'm doing 160 tons, of which probably 80% of that goes to Naked Wines. So Naked Wines has really, you know, assisted me in so many ways to get my name out there, to get my wines out there, and have supported me ever since. So for Naked, I make a specific range under the label Katoria, and it is we could not use Carmen because of obvious reasons. And I then said, okay, my two daughters is Caitlin and Victoria, and I combined that. Not very original, but I said, this is what we're going to go with, and it's been a amazing ride. And I think South Africa has so much to offer in terms of quality, in terms of quality, style, stories, and I think Naked saw that potential really, really early and really celebrated that. But then I also have a range that I started in 2017 for the local market, and that is called Carmen Stevens. And I have a very specific a little icon that's on my label that I must use with my name, otherwise I upset the rest of the world. That's a similar name. And
no, tell us more about this. Tell us about this little icon that you have to use.
so I have a little cat, a tiger on my label. So it's a device that is, it actually
It's linked
speaks.
to your name.
Yes, it's linked to my name.
Okay.
My daughter drew it when she was 6, and I used that to convince the winery in Chile that I can use my name on my bottles. So I must
Okay.
say, Carmen Stevens with this device at all times, which is fine. I'm happy with it.
That is quite fun. That is quite fun. And
Yeah.
tell us about your cellar team. You have 4 guys helping you in the cellar.
So no, we have three guys and myself in the cellar.
Okay.
Yeah. So we are based in Stellenbosch. We don't have our own vineyards, as you said earlier. So I have identified parcels in different regions. I have fantastic relationships with my growers, really salt of the earth, and people that listens to me, people that's willing to listen to what I want from a block of vineyard or from a grape. So I buy in all my fruit, we cart everything in, everything is obviously handpicked, and we have a cellar capacity that can handle up to 180 tons. And that is, again, because of, working with Nakeds, growing my equipment that I is all secondhand basically, but fantastic secondhand equipment. So we hand sort all our fruits. We really pay attention to what goes into that tank. And then I love doing barrel maturation. I invested in new concrete tanks this year that really added another dimension, and just doing a lot of research on different wine styles and different winemaking approaches.
I've got a couple of questions, Carmen. So firstly, do you focus on the traditional French varieties, or are you also starting to use some of the Spanish varieties and Portuguese varieties we're planting in South Africa? That's question number 1. And then another question that I think maybe Master of Wine students would be interested in is, when you're working with the growers in their vineyards, how do you guys mention ripeness? And then one for the cellar as well. Firstly, just because I'm interested, what was the very first piece of cellar equipment you bought? And then secondly, what do you regard as your most important piece of cellar equipment and why? Sorry, and these weren't in the list that I sent you, but I did warn you that I sometimes go off-piste.
Okay, no worries. So I mainly focus on French varietals. We have been looking into other varietals that has been grown and tested at Nitforby, which is our research and development unit in South Africa, but I have not seen wines coming off those vines that has convinced me this is
Okay.
to go. So, but we're now doing different trials and to see how we can maybe adopt what we do in the cellar to complement what we're getting, but that is still on trial.
Okay.
Then if it comes to how do we determine ripeness, so I work with a viticulturist from Winpro, and he has, but I think my years of experience working with Amani vineyards before really taught me what to look for. So we absolutely pick on taste. We do
Absolutely on taste. So no sugar, no dates after flowering, after berry set, anything like that. Just on taste, what
taste,
fits your profile.
but fits my profile. But I do work with phenolic ripeness tests.
Okay. Which
But what I
one?
find I have with Andy Ruderer or something like
Oh,
that.
Andy, yes, he does the test for you. Yes.
Yes. So the same concept that he did, WinLab does something similar. So I do a lot of testing through. So we look at tannins, we look at anthocyanins, we look at obviously taste. But what I found over the years is that test can show me this is ripe, but on taste it doesn't work like that. So that is one of the tools that we use, but that is not what we
The
find
ultimate.
like, yeah, our final decision. And obviously, I think water and deficit irrigation plays a huge role closer to where we pick. And like I said, I have growers that really understands their vines. It's not just people that, grow grapes and there we go. It's really people that is on the ground that can say, Carmen, I know that you said maybe in 2 days, but maybe you must come taste now because I taste something different, or weather is turning and maybe we must make a plan. But still at the end of the day, what I most appreciate about my growers is I make the final call.
Great.
Yeah, so
Fantastic.
we look at tannin, we look at taste, we look at the tannin in the skin, we look at the color of the pulp, we look at the color of the stem, we look at how easily the fruit comes off the skin. But one specific thing that I always say this to youngsters that comes to me for advice, or I have had one student from Stellenbosch that was an intern last year. And the one thing that I learned when I worked in California was it's very difficult when you're young in this industry to taste for ripeness or for optimum ripeness or to get that window right. And the one thing that a winemaker in California taught me, because I was tasting, I can't get these blueberries, I can't get these raspberries. And he said, taste for what you don't want in your wine. So if you taste that berry and it's hard and it dries out your palate and it attacks your palate, that is not ripe. Taste until you are happy with what you taste, because if there's a negative, that will reflect later in your wine. And that is my guide. That is really my guide. Taste for what you don't want, in your wine at the end. You need to get that right. And that for me is easier to explain to a youngster. If it attacks your palate, it's not right. If it's too high in acidity, it's not right.
That's fascinating. That's really quite good advice, I think. It comes at it from a different angle, which I think you've done on a lot of the problems you've had to face. And I'm not going to let you go. What was the first piece of cellar equipment you bought, and which is the most important?
So I think the first piece of equipment I bought, I used to rent space from 2 different cellars, and you come and you need to do a pump over, or you need to rack, and you have to wait for a pump. I said, no, we'll get our own pump. So I bought 2 mono pumps the very first year I had the money, and they are Sarki. The one's name is Sarki, the other one is But. So mono pumps from the beginning, that was my first investment. The most important thing for me in the cellar is probably my sorting tables, because I can decide what must go through. And the brief to the sorters is what you would not put in your mouth to eat cannot go through to the tank. And then the second one is I'm very big on not letting any green through. So last year I invested in a new technology of a crusher destemmer. It's called the Dream. It makes my life very hard, but it's the first year that I've had it, but I can already see that my wines are softer. Now, the previous crusher that I had, and I guess inside there's a drum and there's beaters, and you beat that berries off the stem. And I always felt that when you break that stem, it releases some fluid. It's not a lot, but it does come through. And I was looking for something that would not do that, would not break that stem, would not allow any shot berries through, because once it's in the crusher, there's nothing you can do.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so this new destemmer has a silicone cage that shakes the grapes like this. It's no beating, so it's a very softer, much softer action.
Okay.
Yeah, I did a lot. Kathy, when I looked at it, I thought, because I was looking, where can I make a difference in the cellar? And it just never occurred to me. This crusher is it's a very harsh treatment on fruit. And I was standing there and I'm so, I do all this work before of people taking out what, and then I put this grapes through this, beating it till death. And then I started doing research, and then I found this. I was like, oh my word.
No, it stands to reason, because I mean, even if you take not a piece of stem, but even if you take a little piece of lemon zest and you just bend it slightly, it gives off a little bit of, and you
Yes.
smell it just fleetingly. But now imagine that you're doing that with 1,000 pieces of lemon zest, or 10,000 stems going into your tank or whatever. Of course, there's going to be an impact. So I think it's a very wise move. A very wise move. Now, I wanted to just briefly move on and find out for you, how was COVID for you? I mean, as a country, we're backing out of wearing our masks. We're allowed to shake hands with people, and even though we do still put on the antiseptic before we go into the supermarket or into restaurants, we're moving out of it. And I do know that COVID was a challenge for some winemakers and some wine businesses, but for others, it was that kind of impetus for them to do something different, like set up their website and start selling online. How did you experience COVID? What were your biggest challenges?
My first biggest challenge was getting through my harvest.
Oh, were you one of those who was impacted by the ban on workers in the fields? Okay.
So what we did was I just said we got trucks that was closed off, and we just got the fruit, got it to the cellars, locked the cellar, and just start working with the fruit. But luckily, I was probably on my second last batch when the lockdown, when they announced it. So I just said, what must I do? I need to finish this. So that was my first biggest challenge, getting my people to work and doing all that work without anybody noticing. Luckily, where we are situated, it's on a premises, it's at the back. So even if there's movement on the premise, nobody can see it from the road. That really helped.
Yes, okay. Yes.
Yeah. We've always had a website, but we just went deeper into, or more, we really worked on our e-commerce and social media and pushing it and taking pre-orders for wines. That was, people were so eager to find wine. And I think it became apparent quite quickly that it's not going to be the first or the last lockdown. So a lot of people pre-ordered wine that was delivered after lockdown, or when it was open again. But also, Cathy, the first lockdown, I was a very good citizen. The second
me too. Me too. Second lockdown, not so much.
The second lockdown, I thought, you know what? I still have people that I need to pay at the end of this month. I still have people that is depending on me, and I need to make a plan. And I made a lot of plans, trust me. And I grew my database. I have so many people now in a database, which I never had really before. And it made me more visible to a lot of wine drinkers. That was not the case before. So we really invested in getting somebody that looked after our social media, that really punted us and really said, where we are, how we can make this work. You can order now, we'll make it as soon as that gates open, we'll be at your door. And that really, really worked. That really worked.
Yes, I know there was a lot of people drafted into the deliveries channel when lockdown came out. Yeah, so
Yes.
it was a difficult adventure that we went through as a country. It's going to have long-term impacts, but I do think there was some positives that came out of that.
But
Uh,
Kathy,
um,
sorry, Kathy,
no,
when
no, go on.
first lockdown, remember the ports were closed and we couldn't send out wine, but Naked was selling wine like hotcakes in the UK. So we had there's about, I speak under correction, I think there's about 6 to 8 winemakers in South Africa that works with Naked Wines. And they just one day said, listen guys, let's have a Zoom and talk about how we can assist your industry. So as soon as the ports opened, they came with a suggestion, you can be the middle person and we can help your industry. Get wine, we will pay for it and we will ship it, and through that we help your industry, and we shipped.
I didn't know that, Carmen. Yeah,
We
I didn't know that. So you and the Naked Wines guys were the intermediaries to helping people get through.
yeah.
Oh, that's also really important. I mean, we always do make a plan. As South Africa's wine industry, as many are around the world, can be quite a close industry, and you do tend, by and large, to help each other. But you know, Carmen, there's no getting away for it from you for you. You know, as for most women in the 1990s, when you would have been studying, it would have been really difficult to get into the South African wine industry. For you, it was absolutely a mountain to climb, being a Black woman who wanted to study winemaking. I mean, you applied at Elsenburg twice and they rejected you, and you had to force them to take you. And then you had to go and endure that. So, you know, you beat them all. You're here with your own winery. You've got fantastic partners overseas and have received some great support throughout the time, but you've worked damn hard to get where you've been. And you've always been about giving back to the industry, which is the beauty of the circle that gets fulfilled. But for people who are listening to this podcast who might not understand why words like Black empowerment and upliftment and transformation are such important concepts for us to embrace, do you want to explain to them a little bit about why transformation is so important for the South African wine industry, if we want to keep on being relevant and if we want to move forward as a country, not only as an industry?
Yeah. Thank you, Kathy. So I want to correct you. I applied 3 times to Elsenburg.
3 times for Elsenburg,
3
okay.
times. And you know, when I saw your email, it made me think, and I realized I was so young. And on the 4th time on the 3rd time when they refused, I decided to get onto a train, and the public transport in South Africa is not the greatest. Got onto a train and I went from where I grew up, which is Belhar, to Klapmuts, and I walked from that station to the college. And I don't know, if I look back now, I'm thinking, where did I get that from? My word. So I basically waited for the college head to come and say, this was the 3rd application, and I will not accept a no again. You either take me or I go to the press. And I guess, you know, with the political changes, they were basically forced to make and to accept me as a student at the college. So I always say to people, it's not when people say you were the first Black person to qualify as a winemaker, that's true, but I was also the first Black person to be allowed to study winemaking.
Yes.
And I think that is the crutch here, being allowed. And that comes back to your second question, what is Black economic empowerment? What is transformation? So the government, the South African government said Black economic empowerment is a policy that they brought into the economy of South Africa to give those that were excluded a chance to participate and to benefit economically in our country, where before, to address the inequalities that apartheid gave to this country or made this country to do. So transformation is a transformation of a sector, especially the South African wine sector, that is, we are 27 years later after our first democratic election, and less than 1% of this wine industry is black. And that is where the transformation, it's the transformation. We need to transfer, it's a transformation of land, of ownership, of just having a voice, a stake in industry where we as black people has always played a major part, because without the black people of this industry, and I think it was demonstrated so well a few years ago when there was this uproar in, I think it was Robertson, where pickers just refused to pick, and the industry came to a standstill. That really showed how important black people are to this industry. So all government is saying is, we cannot forever be the workers. We cannot forever be the people that is not part of the decision making. We need to be part of what we helped to grow to what it is today. And that in essence is what transformation and black empowerment in the industry is all about. Now, if you look at me being the first person to qualify, there is not a lot of winemakers maybe that has the necessary experience and years in the industry to fully understand the whole value chain. But in each of these value chain, little chains, there is people that has been working there forever and a day. So they understand, they can bring something to the table. And that is why it is so important that in every of these little chains, there is black people that come to the fore and is part of the decision making, part of the profit sharing, part of what has always been there, but we were always excluded. Now, land is a big issue in South Africa, and you know, previously I engaged with Jancis Robertson on this, and you know, land in Stellenbosch is, there was over 1,200 hectares that was allocated to white farmers in 93 on 55-year leases, which excludes somebody like me. They brought in policies that exclude somebody that has qualified, has years of experience. I buy 30% of my fruit in Stellenbosch. The people that I employ stays in Stellenbosch. So I contribute, and like many other black-owned brands, contribute to the income of Stellenbosch, and yet I'm not going to call it the industry. I'll say people has found ways to exclude and still exclude people of color to have a proper footing in this industry. And that is what we need to overcome. We need to overcome the problem with infrastructure. We need to overcome the problem with land. And if land, let's just go back to land. Land is such a sensitive issue. So government a few years ago said they're going to take back some of the land that's municipal land. And we maintain that if it is used, it's sustainable, it's profitable. We don't want it, but if it's there and it's not being used, why can it not be issued to black winemakers that has the experience, that wants infrastructure, that wants to have a home for their wines? We radically have to work on that. That said, Cathy, last year, November, government, through the Transformation Unit, has initiated a premises that is now called the home for 11 black-owned brands in South Africa. where it's situated, it speaks to the South Africa, where you can see the informal settlement on the one side, and the South Africa where you see the green, the white buildings, and all the opulence that goes with the wine industry. So it's very well positioned in terms of location. It is a premises that allows us not just to have a tasting room, because nobody has tasting rooms. So by the way, there is over 67 black-owned brands in South Africa. We'll come back to what is a black-owned brand. And nobody has one person has a tasting room in Stellenbosch, but that's only a tasting room. And let's call it the glass ceilings that has been put up to discourage that is a true reality. So this premises gives us a tasting room, it gives us e-commerce, it gives us route to market, and gives us the opportunity to showcase what we can offer and what, in terms of quality, in terms of style, to the general public.
And this is in Stellenbosch.
It's in Stellenbosch. It's called the Wine Arc.
That's right.
It's called the Wine Arc, yes. And the reason for the name is because it's on the ARC, the Research and Development premises.
Okay, yes.
So it's an old cellar that was sitting there and nobody used it. And it was just revamped to be able to host people. And with Cape Wine, we aim to have a lot of international guests visit, see, and experience what we as Black-owned brands have to offer in that space.
Well, I'd like to suggest that anybody who's listening to this podcast and is coming to Cape Wine, makes a special request that they get on one of the tours to see this. And in that way, it would absolutely help you. Are you going as a unit to Cape Wine? Are you exhibiting together? Okay, so you're going to have a big presence there as well.
Yes, so we actually, I mean, we have so many ideas, and the lady that's behind all of this, really pushing for it, has been in the industry for, I met her in '93 in the industry. And she's also a Black lady, and she, you know, she understands the whole value chain because she used to be in R&D. Then she worked for DGB, she worked for KWV, she worked for Distel, understanding the whole value chain, and can really, really add and be a benefit to the Black-owned brands. What do I want to say now?
Because the hardest part about the wine industry is usually selling it and then getting it to market.
Absolutely. So
you need expertise there, yes.
Yeah, so her vision was always, let's do it as a collective, because collectively we have a louder voice, we'll be seen, we need to be dealt with. We are as a collective, we just have a bigger presence. And that is how all of this came about. And at Cape Wine, we will have our 11 brands on one stand and branded and marketed so people can take notice of us.
Well, good luck with that. I'm looking forward to coming to visit the stand, and I'm sure you'll get thousands of visitors that will come and taste the wine. And then they can order it off your website using e-commerce and everybody's new e-commerce capabilities. So I know that the Institute wants to keep these podcasts to quite short, and we've been pretty long already because it's really great to chat to you. I haven't seen you for absolutely ages. But what I'd really like to finish on is a good news story. So please tell us a little bit more about your NPO, because NPO's giving back foundations seem to be, well, they're a big part of a lot of people of colour's lives. Everybody seems to want to give back, and it's really wonderful to acknowledge where you come from. There are a lot of other selfish people who don't want to do that kind of thing. And it's also something that perhaps international markets don't fully understand, why there's this need, this desire to give back to the community. Carmen?
I'm so glad that you know, that you said, the words that you use, and I'll tell you why. My mother was a factory worker, and come Thursday night, we were lucky if we had a sandwich to eat, because Friday she will pay again, and then there's food in the house until next week. So a lot of people always ask me, why can't these people provide for their own children? And the answer is as simple as this. If you are a minimum wage earner, you still have to pay for the roof over your head, water, electricity. In my case, it was getting the children to school, because we attended school in a different place than where we grew up. Clothing, food.
Transport, which is a big factor when it comes to the working class people in South Africa.
And especially now with all these rising prices of diesel and fuel. So I always say it's not that they don't want to look after their own children. That little bit of money only covers so much of that list of responsibilities that these people have. So in 2011, I started very small. I always said not less than 300, but not more than 500 kids, because it came out of my own pocket, and I provided a cup of soup 3 times a week at 3 schools. In 2015, Naked Wines every year has 2 tours. Sitting next to one of the, he was a CFO, and they gave me 6,000 rand, 6,000 rand. And he said, you can do, this is what we've spent on our staff. We would like to give it to you and see how we can help you. And we could provide that soup again for 2.5 months. And I took pictures and thank you notes from school, and I emailed it to Naked and said, thank you so much. We really appreciate your contribution. Not thinking anything, just, yeah. And they were so blown away what we could do with 6,000 rand. And the question was put to me, how would you feel if we engage the people that's buying your wines if they don't want to chip into this? And initially I thought, okay, if we get 30 or 50,000 rand, I can give each school amount of money, and they need to produce receipts then for me, because most of these schools have kitchens. Naked gave me a platform for 1 day. We raised 1.2 million in 10 hours. I was like,
it's fantastic.
I said, I cannot give this money to schools. My name is connected to this much more than I. So that is when I registered the NPO, or the foundation. That first year, with that money, we could provide 3,060 learners with a breakfast and a lunch at school. Not just a cup of soup, a breakfast and a lunch. Over the years, every year, the angels, the Naked Angels, the people that buys Naked's wines, ask, when are we going to have another donation day? It's now up to a week. During COVID, I had to take an initiative because there was no school. I could not feed in school, so we went into community kitchens. We fed over 18,000 kids during COVID. Every day, a breakfast and a lunch through community kitchens. Last year, Naked raised 13 million rand towards this program. At the moment, we are feeding over 25,000, well, the exact number, 25,531 learners, a breakfast and a lunch. There's 198 school days, 198 days of the year. And we are now in 125 schools, giving back and making a difference and making children that, I promise you, the impact that we have is crazy. It's taking away aggression, bringing in interaction with the teachers. Kids that is happy to come to school because they see this not just as a safe haven, but also a place where they're gonna get a plate of food. Our results has escalated. Our kids are playing more sport. The girls, I never knew this. The menstrual cycles is more regular. Ear infections has gone down. The impact is crazy. It's incomprehensible. You sit there, you think, oh my God. I had a little boy that said to me before I came, I think it was like 12, 13. He said to me, before I came onto the program, I weighed 35. I weigh 37, 47 since I've been on the program. That is the impact. That is.
Well, it's absolutely phenomenal what programs like yours can do, because nutrition and malnutrition severely impacts brain formation, brain functioning, as well as the body function. So it's a phenomenal good news story, Carmen.
You know, Cathy, people always look at, because I'm very short, and I realize my mother will probably kill me for this, but luckily my parents are all short. But what we've seen is that we can reverse stunting in kids by feeding them 2 meals a day. We've now introduced an after-school program as well to help those kids. And you know what, Cathy, what for me is the most fantastic about this is the fact that this wine that's was always seen as the evil, is making that difference.
Is making a difference. And Carmen, I think that story wraps it up perfectly. It shows exactly why you were given this Visionary Leadership Award earlier this year. And I'm pretty sure you're going to win it again before you leave this industry. But thank you for your time. And I'm so pleased the lights came on just at the beginning of our discussion so that we could eventually see you. So a space spade for all the coming cutouts and load shedding, and enjoy your evening.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the interview.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Cathy.
Cheers.